Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight's episode features two camping horror stories, both about what happens when you're not as alone as you think. Huge thanks to the author for sharing these experiences. Grab something to drink, dim the lights, and let's get into some terrifying camping horror stories. The forecast said snow showers. That is the exact phrase that got me to throw my pack in the trunk like I was beating the clock on some fun little weekend reset. Snow showers. By the time I reached the pull-off, the world was already turning white in that slow, steady way that makes you feel like you're inside a shaken snow globe. It wasn't blizzard conditions yet, just thick flakes and wind that kept changing its mind. The kind of weather where you can still hear your own boots in the powder and convince yourself you're fine. I signed the trail register with a pen that didn't want to work. My glove made my handwriting look like a toddler's. There was one other name above mine from earlier that morning. No notes, no back by sunset. Just a name and a time that felt too early to still matter. The first half mile in, I started second guessing myself. Not because I was scared, because every tree looked the same and snow eats landmarks. Trailblazes disappear when they get frosting on them. Tracks turn into soft dents and then nothing. Your world shrinks to whatever your headlamp hits, and mine wasn't even on yet. I kept going anyway, because that's how I am. If I've committed to something, I'll drag it behind me like a bad decision on a leash. I picked a spot the way I always do. Not too close to water, not in a low pocket where cold air settles, not under dead branches. A little rise off the trail with a couple of thick trunks to break the wind. Nothing dramatic, just a place that looked like it would still be there when I woke up. Setting up in snow is never graceful. I stamped out a rectangle with my boots until the powder packed down. Dug out a shallow trench for my vestibule so I wouldn't be crawling into a drift. Anchored my guy lines with buried sticks because the ground was too frozen for stakes. My fingers went numb halfway through, and I told myself it was fine because I had a sleeping bag rated way colder than this, and a stove, and those little hand warmers that smell like pennies when they heat up. It should have been simple. It should have just been cold. While I worked, the woods kept doing that thing where it goes quiet in patches. Not the normal snow muffles sound quiet. I mean the kind where you realize you haven't heard a bird in a while. No squirrel chatter, no little taps from branches. Just wind and the soft hiss of snow landing on nylon. The first time I noticed it, I actually stopped and listened, like I expected someone to clear their throat behind a tree. Nothing. I finished pitching the tent and went to fetch more deadfall for a small fire. Not to be dramatic, just because fire makes the dark feel less personal. That's when I saw the tracks. They weren't mine. Mine were wide, boot-shaped, predictable. These were longer, like someone had taken a shovel and dragged it toe first. A single line of impressions, deep enough to show wet under the powder. Each one spaced too far apart to be walking normally. I followed them without thinking. 10 steps, 20. They went in a straight line between two stands of pine, and then they stopped at a scoured patch where the wind had polished the snow down to hardpack near exposed stone. No clean turn, no tidy return trail, just the last drag mark fading into a surface that didn't hold detail the way fresh powder does. I stood there with my gloved hand still gripping a dead branch, staring at the last mark until the storm started filling everything in. The wind picked up, and a spray of powder hit my face. That's when I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, more like a slow drag, like someone pulling a heavy bag over crusted snow. I whipped around fast enough to almost lose my balance. All I saw was the thinning light between trees, and my own breath, and the start of my boot trail back to camp. The dragging sound stopped the second I turned. I did the thing you're not supposed to do. I called out. Hello? My voice sounded wrong, like it didn't belong in the woods. No answer. Of course no answer. I told myself it was a branch, a deer, the wind moving a downed log, anything that fit into the normal world. Then I noticed something I hadn't noticed the first time. Those long tracks weren't centered the way a person's would be. They weren't two parallel lines like skis either. They were slightly off, like whatever made them had one side of its body heavier than the other, like it leaned. I carried the branch back to camp and tried to shake it off. I got my fire going with a little stove fuel and stubbornness. The flame fought the wind but didn't quit. It popped and snapped like it was annoyed. I ate a sad dinner standing up, instant noodles in a metal cup, because sitting on snow makes your body remember exactly what heat is worth. I kept turning my head to check the trees, not because I saw anything, but because my brain kept insisting I should. The storm thickened in layers. It wasn't just snow now. It was snow with teeth. Gusts that shoved it sideways, flakes stinging my cheeks, visibility dropping until the firelight felt like a little island, and everything outside it was just the wall. I crawled into the tent early, not because I was tired, because being outside started to feel like being watched through frosted glass. Inside, everything was close and loud. Nylon breathing, zippers clicking, my sleeping pad squeaking every time I shifted. I stripped off wet layers and stuffed them into a bag so they wouldn't freeze into boards. I checked my phone. No service, obviously. The battery already draining faster than it should in the cold. I lay there with my headlamp off, listening. Wind, snow, tent fabric snapping, then very faint, the drag again. Not outside the tent, further out, somewhere between the tree line and the trail. Drag, pause, drag. I held my breath like that mattered. The dragging got closer, slow, patient. I sat up and turned my headlamp on. The beam turned the inside of my tent into a bright little fish tank. I stared at the nylon, like I could see through it if I stared hard enough. Drag, pause, then something touched the outside of the tent. Not a gust, not snow sliding, a pressure, deliberate, like a palm placed flat against it. The fabric bowed inward and held. I didn't move. I don't mean I stayed calm, I mean my body went rigid in a way that felt automatic. The pressure slid, just a little, like whatever was out there was feeling along the seam. It stopped near the zipper. I grabbed my knife. I always carry a small fixed blade for camp stuff, cutting cord, shaving kindling. It looks stupid in my hand suddenly, like bringing a pocket knife to an argument with the weather. The fabric at the zipper pulled. Not the zipper itself, the fabric around it, like fingers trying to find purchase. I didn't think. I lunged forward and shoved both hands against the door, pushing back from the inside, trying to keep whatever it was from getting leverage. For a second, there was resistance, real resistance, something solid. Then the pressure vanished. The tent snapped back into place. Silence. I sat there in that awful bright circle of headlamp light, sweating in my base layer, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing happened. That was worse. After a few minutes, I forced myself to breathe normally. I clicked the headlamp to red mode and unzipped the door just enough to look out. Snow blasted in immediately, cold and sharp. I squinted into it. The beam of my light got swallowed fast, just a short cone before it dissolved into white. I couldn't see anything, but I could see the marks. There were fresh impressions right outside my vestibule, partially filling with snow. Not boot prints, not animal tracks. Those long, leaning drags ending inches from my door. And mixed in with them, very faint, were thinner lines, like something with nails or claws had raked the snow as it moved. The prints didn't lead away. They circled my tent. Not a clean circle, more like it had paced around, stopping, starting, doubling back, then pressing close again. I zipped the tent shut so hard the teeth snagged. And that's when I heard it. A sound that made my stomach drop because it was trying, badly, to be familiar. It was a voice, not a word, not a sentence, just a low, throaty attempt at the shape of a human sound, the way a parrot can mimic a laugh without understanding it. It came from somewhere beyond the trees, past the edge of my light. It went, "Hey," soft, almost polite. Then silence. Then closer, "Hey." The second one had more breath in it, more confidence. I pressed my mouth into my sleeve to keep my own breathing quiet, like a kid hiding under covers. "Hey," it tried again, right outside the tent now. So close I felt it more than heard it, like the nylon was carrying the vibration. The voice was wrong in a way I can't explain without sounding dramatic. It wasn't scary because it was loud. It was scary because it wasn't quite right, like something had listened to people speak from far away and decided it could do it too. My headlamp beam shook as my hand shook. The tent wall bulged inward again. This time, it didn't feel like a palm. This time, it felt like a face pressed into it. I saw the shape of it in the nylon, an oval with ridges, like bone or cartilage. The fabric stretched across it and held, showing the suggestion of where eyes would be, where a mouth would be. The mouth moved. "Cold," it said. Then, with a little laugh that sounded like someone choking, "You cold." I don't know why that broke me, but it did. I kicked at the wall where its head was pressed, hard enough to make my heel sting. The shape snapped back, the nylon popped outward. Outside, something made a noise like wet fabric being pulled apart. Then the dragging started again. Faster, circling. Drag, 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 drag. The whole tent shivered with each pass, like it was brushing against it, bumping it, testing it. I grabbed my car keys, not because I was going to drive, because the alarm button felt like the only weapon I had that wasn't a joke. I crawled into my boots, hands shaking so bad I missed the laces twice. I stuffed my sleeping bag into its sack without rolling it, just crammed it down. Threw what I could into my pack, half zipped. I had one thought, clear and bright in my head. Get to the car. The storm was thick enough that I couldn't see the trail from my tent. I had to follow my own boot line by feel, like reading Braille with my feet. I unzipped the tent and bolted out. The cold hit me so hard it made my eyes water instantly. Snow slapped my face. Wind shoved my pack like it wanted me on the ground. I took 3 steps and almost fell because the snow had drifted into my boot prints. Behind me, something moved. Not dragging now, running. It hit the side of my tent with a heavy thump, like it had launched itself at it the second I left, and the whole structure collapsed in on itself. Poles flexed, snapped back, then folded. My little island of shelter crumpled like a kicked soda can. That gave me a horrible, vivid image of it being angry that I was leaving. I ran. My headlamp beam bounced wildly, making the woods strobe. Trees appeared and vanished. My own breath sounded like an engine failing. Then something grabbed my pack. It yanked me backwards so hard my spine jolted. I went down on one knee, pack straps biting into my shoulders. My first thought was that a branch had hooked it. Then the pack moved sideways, smooth and strong, and I realized whatever had it was pulling. I twisted around and my light hit it for half a second. It was low to the ground, but long, too long. Its body was pale in a way that didn't look like fur or skin, more like packed snow pressed into the shape of something alive. It had limbs, but they didn't bend right. They hinged too many times. And its head looked like it was wearing a mask that didn't fit it, like it had pressed a mask of frozen skin onto bone. The mouth opened and I saw dark inside, wet and wrong. It didn't roar, it didn't snarl. It went softly, like it was still practicing, "Hey." Then it jerked again, trying to pull me off the trail.
I did the only thing that made sense. I let my pack go. The strap slipped off my shoulders and the thing went with it, tugging it into the white like it weighed nothing. I scrambled up and sprinted. Behind me, the dragging returned for a second as it adjusted. Then it came after me with a new sound, a rapid tapping, like nails on crusted snow. I could hear it gaining. My foot punched through a thin crust and I went down hard, my shin smacking something buried beneath. Rock or root, I still don't know. Pain flashed hot and then went oddly dull. I tried to get up and my leg didn't want to cooperate. I forced it anyway, half running, half limping, tears freezing at the corners of my eyes. My headlamp beam caught the trail register sign ahead like a miracle, a reflective rectangle in the storm. The pull-off was close. I hit the edge of the lot and saw my car as a dark shape under white. I fumbled my keys so badly I dropped them, had to find them by feel in the snow, fingers crawling, panic making everything clumsy. I got them, jammed the key into the door, yanked it open, nearly fell into the seat.
The tapping sound was right behind me now. I slammed the door. The car rocked. Something hit the side hard enough to make the whole frame creak. I locked the doors out of instinct, like a lock meant anything against whatever that was. The windshield was already frosting. Snow plastered against it. I turned a key and the engine coughed once, then nothing. The battery, cold-soaked. The car had decided to join the storm in being useless. Another impact, this time on the hood. I looked up through the windshield and saw a shape on the glass, inches away, sliding down slowly. Not a face, not fully, just a pale oval pressing against the windshield from the outside, leaving a smeared patch where frost melted under it. The mouth moved, muffled through glass. "You cold," it said. Then it made that choking laugh again. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely press the panic button, but I did. The car erupted into noise, horn blaring, lights flashing, a ridiculous, desperate alarm in the middle of nowhere. The shape flinched. It peeled off the hood and dropped into the snow with that wrong, jointed motion. The head turned toward the sound like it didn't understand it, like it was hearing a new kind of animal. It took a step back, then another. I hit the ignition again and again, begging the engine like it was a person. On the fourth try, it caught. The heater fan whined weakly. The headlights cut through the snow in two pale tunnels. I threw the car into reverse without thinking about traction, and the tire spun, then grabbed, then slid. I fishtailed, corrected, and backed onto the road like I was fleeing a burning building. In my rearview mirror, through the chaos of white, I saw it standing at the edge of the lot, not chasing now, just watching. It lifted one arm slowly, like someone waving goodbye. Then it raised its hand to its mouth, pressed fingers against it, and moved them like it was shaping sound. "Hey," it said one last time, and it sounded closer to normal than it should have. I drove until I hit pavement that looked plowed and saw lights in the distance. The shaking didn't stop. My shin had swollen under my pants, and when I finally dared to pull over somewhere with a street lamp, I saw blood seeping through the fabric where I'd slammed it on whatever was under that snow crust. The next afternoon, after I'd gotten my leg looked at, I went to the ranger station and asked about the other name on the trail register. The woman behind the counter went still for a second, then told me the register wasn't for public discussion, and that if I wanted information, I could file a report. She didn't meet my eyes when she said it. At urgent care, they did an x-ray and told me nothing was broken, then rinsed the cut and put in a few stitches anyway, because the rock had split me open clean through the skin. I keep replaying the way those drag marks circled my tent, stopping at the zipper like it knew what that seam meant. I keep thinking about the way it practiced that one word, over and over, like it was trying to get the tone right. And every time I catch myself wanting to write it off as storm panic, I remember the pressure of something solid through the tent wall and the sound it made when it peeled away, wet and wrong. I haven't slept outside since. I am writing this from a hospital waiting room with my hands wrapped like I tried to catch barbed wire on instinct. I went camping last weekend at a state park outside my town. That is what the reservation email said. Loop C. I still have the receipt. It is smeared from rain and sweat, but I can read enough of it. State park. Camping fee, 1 night. Vehicle fee. Total $35. A reservation ID that means nothing to anyone except me. I am not asking you to believe in the paranormal. Something mechanical happened to me out there. Something you can buy, carry in a tote, and switch on. I camp alone a lot. I do it the boring way. I tell my sister where I am. I park nose out. I lock food up. I do not hike off trail at night. I do not drink. I do not go looking for trouble. This time, I wanted one quiet night and a morning coffee that tastes like smoke. I got there around 4:40 p.m. The ranger in the booth tore my printed slip and gave me the usual talk about quiet hours and not leaving coolers unattended. The entrance sign had a changeable letterboard under it. Fire danger was moderate, no moving firewood. Quiet hours 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The park was half full, families and big SUVs, a couple with a rooftop tent, a group of teenagers arguing over a Bluetooth speaker that kept cutting out when they walked too far from it. Loop C sat deeper in the pines. The road was dirt and washboarded. My spot was on the outer edge, not the best view, but private. Picnic table, fire ring. One of those steel bear boxes, bolted into a slab of concrete, the kind that squeals when you open it. The first thing that felt off was the posts. There were 4 skinny fiberglass stakes around my site, about waist height, with bright orange reflective tape on the tops, like survey markers. They were spaced in a loose square that did not match a normal campsite boundary. Each stake had a black zip tie near the top, cinched tight around nothing. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at them with my hands on my hips like that would solve anything. I told myself it was maintenance, hazard tree marking, utility work, something. I set up my tent, a little 2-person backpacking tent. I parked nose out. I put my cooler in the bear box. Here is the stupid human mistake I keep replaying. I did not latch the bear box the first time. I closed it. I heard the heavy door thunk. I walked away thinking it was secure. 10 minutes later, I walked back and realized the latch was still open by half an inch, the way it sits when you don't pull it down and lock it. I muttered at myself, fixed it, and moved on. Around 6:10, I walked to the restroom building to wash up. The building was painted that tired park bathroom green, and it smelled like damp concrete and lemon cleaner that never quite wins. On the way back, I passed a bigger site where a dad was pounding stakes into the ground with the flat side of a hatchet. He nodded at me and said the bugs were insane. I agreed even though I hadn't noticed bugs yet. He looked past me toward my site and squinted like he was trying to read something in the dark. "What are those poles?" he asked. "Already here," I said. "Probably maintenance." He made a face like he didn't love that answer, then went back to his tent. I made a small fire, not a big one, just enough to feel like I earned being outside. I ate a pouch dinner and sat on the bench with my headlamp around my neck, listening to the campground noise thin out. A baby cried somewhere down the loop. Someone laughed too loud and got shushed. A car door slammed. Then it got quiet in that way campgrounds do, where you still hear people, but it comes in little distant pieces. At 9:58, my phone flipped to 5G to SOS. I remember because I looked at it before crawling into my sleeping bag. I texted my sister, "All good, night." It failed to send, not surprising. Lots of parks have dead spots. I fell asleep with my keys in my hand. That's another thing I normally never do. I always put them in the same pocket. This time I was half asleep and I set them on the picnic table when I tightened my tent guy lines, then forgot to pick them back up. I didn't realize that until later, when it mattered. I slept for maybe 2 hours. I woke up because my tent moved. Not a gentle flutter of wind, a hard tug, like someone grabbed a rainfly and yanked. My first thought was an animal brushing past. Then the tent moved again, lower, like pressure at ankle height. I sat up fast, my elbow hit the tent wall. My heart went straight to my throat. I listened. No footsteps, no snorting, just a faint sound outside that didn't belong. A tiny clicking, steady, like a cheap plastic pen being pressed over and over. Click, click, click. I found my headlamp and turned it on, pointing it at the tent wall. The nylon glowed. Shadows moved wrong. Thin lines crossed the fabric, not like branches, not like the normal wavering shapes you see when a light hits canvas. I pushed the door zipper open just enough to look out. The beam hit the orange tape on the nearest stake and flashed bright. Behind it, in the dark, something caught the light in sharp little glints. Clear line, fishing line, monofilament. Dozens of strands stretched between the stakes, some at shin height, some at waist height, some higher. A web that had not been there when I went to sleep. And it was moving, not swaying, pulling, tightening. The clicking got faster. A line snapped tight across the front of my tent door, and the nylon creased around it like it was being cinched. The tent shifted an inch, then another. I crawled out on my hands and knees because standing felt like begging to get clotheslined. The headlamp made the lines sparkle for half a second, then they vanished again unless the beam hit them at the right angle. A line caught my wrist. It did not wrap gently. It bit. Pain so clean it felt hot. It dug into skin like a wire saw. I yanked back on instinct, and the line tightened, dragging my hand forward towards the nearest stake. My headlamp bounced. The beam flashed over the ground, and I saw where the lines were anchored. Small black boxes at the base of trees, each about the size of a brick. Each had a spool and a little metal wheel like a tiny winch. The clicking was coming from those boxes. They were pulling the line in. A second line snapped up and caught two of my fingers together. My hand cramped instantly. I felt my pulse banging against plastic and pressure. I went for my pocket knife, got it open, brought it down on the line at my wrist. It did not cut right away. The line stretched. The blade skated. Then finally it nicked through. The moment it broke, the free end snapped back and whipped my knuckles. I rolled, trying to get clear. A line tightened under my armpit. Another caught my ankle and my foot slid towards a stake like the ground had turned slick. I started yelling, loud, ugly. I screamed for help until my throat burned. No one came running. Either nobody heard or nobody wanted to charge into a campsite full of invisible line. Then I heard something new, not clicking, a soft electronic chirp like a key fob, followed by a longer tone. One of the winch boxes changed pitch. It went from click to a smooth high whine for half a second. The line on my wrist tightened again, and I understood what it was doing. This wasn't just a web. It was a net that was closing around me. I crawled towards the nearest box, cutting lines as I went. Each cut line snapped back, stinging, sometimes catching my clothes. The knife handle got slick with blood. My wrist burned in a clean groove where the line had opened it. I reached the nearest box. It was strapped to the trunk with a ratchet strap. A thick battery pack sat beside it, wired in. On top was a small antenna, like a cheap handheld radio. The line ran through a metal guide and onto a spool. I drove the knife down and cut as close to the spool as I could. The motor protested. The line went slack for a breath. Then the spool reversed and yanked the slack back. The line tightened again around my calf, harder, like the system corrected itself. Something in the trees flashed to my left. A red dot, low, moving. My headlamp caught a shape behind a trunk. Someone using the trees, keeping distance. A hand raised. I saw the rectangle of a phone or remote. The red dot moved again and settled on my torso, steady, like it was aimed on purpose. My stomach turned cold, not because of the dot, because of what it meant. This was for me. I grabbed the battery cable and ripped it out of the box. The clicking stopped. The line around my leg went slack so suddenly I almost fell backward. For half a second, it was quiet except for my breathing and the soft snap of the fire dying down in the ring. Then another clicking started farther away. Another box. Back up. The lines began tightening again, slower but still tightening. The person in the trees shifted, leaves crushed under a careful step. I did not wait. I crawled out of the tightening net, cutting and dragging, getting snagged, freeing myself in inches. My shorts tore, my skin caught line, and I felt it burn new grooves across my thigh and forearm. My headlamp bounced, turning the trees into quick flashes. I got to my car and reached for my keys. Nothing. My pocket was empty. My brain did this blank, stupid pause like it tried to deny reality for a second. Then it hit me. Picnic table. The clicking sped up again. The net tightened again. I could feel it starting to catch my waist. I turned my headlamp toward the picnic table and saw them glinting there like a cruel joke, right where I left them. I crawled to the table, grabbed them, and my wrist screamed when the line shifted against the cut. I got back to the car, hit unlock, and yanked the door open. A line snapped tight across my waist as I tried to get in. It caught on my belt and pulled me back hard enough that my head clipped the door frame. I screamed and cut at it. The knife finally sliced through. The tension snapped back into the trees. I fell into the seat, slammed the door, and locked it. Lines slapped the outside of the car. I heard them ping against the metal like cables flicking a drum. In my headlight beam, I saw the stakes again, and my stomach dropped even more. There were more than 4. Extra stakes beyond the campsite boundary, closer to the road, hidden in brush. The web reached toward the road like it expected me to run. I started the car and threw it into reverse. The tires spun on dirt. The car lurched and I felt a jolt, like I hit something soft but strong. The hood dipped. The line stretched. For a second, I thought the car would be held in place. Then the line snapped. The sound was sharp, multiplied. Whip cracks. The hood shook. Something slapped the windshield and left a wet streak. I reversed hard, then swung forward, aiming for the main road out of the loop. In my mirror, between trunks, I saw the person move. A silhouette, closer now. Reflective tape on their sleeves, orange like the stakes. They stepped toward my car and raised a hand. Not waving, pointing. My headlights swept the ground, and for a second, I saw what they'd been standing near. A plastic tote, half buried in needles, lid cracked open, full of coiled clear line and more black boxes. Supplies. I hit the gas. On the way out, I laid on the horn until it sounded wrong. I wanted lights to come on. I wanted witnesses. Some did. Porch lights snapped on, a man stepped onto the road in socks, hands up like he did not know whether to stop me or ask what was wrong. I did not stop. I drove straight to the entrance booth. It was closed, dark, but there was an emergency phone box by the gate. A small sign above it said to lift the receiver for emergencies and not to use it for reservations. My hand shook so badly I dropped the receiver once. I told the dispatcher someone had set wire traps in my campsite, and there were motors pulling them tight. I kept saying wire because fishing line sounded too stupid for what it had done. A sheriff's deputy arrived first, then a ranger in a separate vehicle. They took one look at my wrists and legs and told me to sit. They drove back to Loop C with lights on. I didn't go with them. I couldn't make myself. I sat under a buzzing light and watched moths slam into the plastic cover while my blood dripped onto the concrete. I remember thinking very clearly that the drip was too slow to be real, like my brain was watching it in someone else's body. When the ranger came back, his face looked different, like he'd aged 10 years on the drive. He did not tell me it was nothing. He did not tell me I imagined it. He said, "We found it." They found the stakes. They found the lines. They found multiple winch boxes still strapped to trees, still working, still pulling line even after I'd ripped one battery loose. They found the tote. They did not find the person. At the hospital, they irrigated the cuts. They picked clear fragments out of my skin with tweezers. They gave me a tetanus shot. The doctor asked if I'd been attacked. I told him yes. He asked what by. I told him a system. 2 days later, I drove past that state park on my way to work just to prove to myself it existed. The sign is still there. The entrance still looks friendly. The little tourist board still advertises it like a peaceful place to unwind. Loop C is closed now. There is new signage zip-tied to the permanent posts. Bright yellow, temporary. It says the area is closed due to utility work and not to enter Loop C. If I ever camp again and see skinny fiberglass stakes with reflective tape that do not make sense or zip ties around nothing, I won't assume it is maintenance. I won't sleep in that site. I won't step between those posts. And if I hear clicking in the dark that doesn't sound like an animal, I'm leaving. I'm doing it before the lines start moving. Because once they start pulling, you stop being a camper. You become a problem somebody planned to solve. If you enjoyed these stories, let me know which one stayed with you the longest. Huge thanks to the original author for sharing this experiences. Like the video, subscribe if you want more quiet horror like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.